everybody, my name is Miss Melissa, and today we are going to learn about Thanksgiving and turkeys because it's Thanksgiving week, right? Does anybody know what year the first Thanksgiving took place? It was in 1621. That's a long time ago, isn't it? So the first one took place in 1621, and do you know how long it lasted? It lasted over 3 days. Could you imagine having Thanksgiving for 3 whole days? There was a lot of work that went into that first Thanksgiving, and the first Thanksgiving probably didn't quite look like ours does today. So we're gonna play a game. You wanna play a game with me? I'm gonna ask you some Thanksgiving dishes that we might have at our Thanksgiving, or that maybe we don't have at our Thanksgiving, and we're gonna decide if those dishes were at the first Thanksgiving, if they're at our Thanksgiving, or if they were at both. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first one up is this guy. Does anybody know what it is? A lobster. Do you think that was at the first Thanksgiving, our Thanksgiving, or at both? It was at the first Thanksgiving. Isn't that amazing? So the first Thanksgiving was a little bit different than how we think of Thanksgiving today. And one of those big differences is what they ate. And lobster was actually a pretty common thing. So most of the first settlers came over and they lived on the East Coast, close to the water, because if you're close to the water, that means there's usually food available and all the things that you kind of need. If you need a shipment of something, they usually came by ship. So it was really easy actually to go lobster hunting. And most of the time they would just go down to the beach, reach under the rocks right along the shoreline and pull out a lobster, and that's what they would have for dinner. So lobster was pretty easy to come by. So does anybody have lobster at their Thanksgiving now? I keep trying to convince my family that we should. Okay, so lobster was at the first Thanksgiving. Okay, and then these are mashed potatoes. I love mashed potatoes. Do you guys like mashed potatoes? So is this at the first Thanksgiving, our Thanksgiving, or both? This is at our Thanksgiving, so present day Thanksgiving. It was not at the first Thanksgiving. They didn't have root vegetables yet. Okay, so the next one is this. A deer. Do you eat deer at your Thanksgiving? Some of you might. So this was actually another common meat that was served at the first Thanksgiving. So they went on a big group hunting the week before Thanksgiving in order to catch some food. And deer are pretty readily available at that time because this is the time of deer to be in their what we call rut. So they're going to be moving around a lot. So they had harvested several deer, and that was a big portion of their meat that they had. All right, next one. This is my favorite part about Thanksgiving. Sweet potatoes. So was this at the first Thanksgiving, our Thanksgiving, or both? This is present day, so this is one that we have. So again, just like mashed potatoes, a sweet potato is a root vegetable, so they didn't have them at the first one. Okay, next one. This is corn. Which one do you think? This was at both. So the first Thanksgiving, they had lots of corn. And at our Thanksgiving, most of the time, I know that people have corn. Sometimes it's prepared a little bit different. So at the first Thanksgiving, they probably just ate it off the cob or they shaved it off into a big pot. We probably don't eat it off the cob this time of year. You might have it in a bowl, or some people, like my family, we make something called a corn casserole. So it's like corn with cornbread. So good. This is cranberry sauce. Was this at the present day first Thanksgiving, or both? This is a present day type of thing. So the first Thanksgiving, they really didn't have sugar or anything like that to make the cranberry sauce. So if they had fruit, they might have had cranberries, but they wouldn't have had the sauce like we know today. What about green beans? Do you think they had that at the first Thanksgiving? They did, and you probably have it at your Thanksgiving too. You probably have it in a casserole, right? So the first Thanksgiving, they would have just served regular plain green beans, and nowadays we kind of dress them up just a little bit. This next one is probably most people's favorite. Pumpkin pie. Do you think they had pumpkin pie at the first Thanksgiving? Nope. They had something like that. So they did have pumpkins, and they would cut the pumpkins in half or other squash and roast them with seasoning, but they didn't have sugar. They ran out of their sugar reserves long before this, and they didn't really have flour. So they kind of made do with what they had. Okay, the last one. A turkey. Do you think a turkey was a present day, the first Thanksgiving, or both? This is a present day type of thing. There wasn't turkey at the first Thanksgiving. Turkeys were hard to hunt and hard to find. So most of the time they weren't eating turkey. Having turkey is an American tradition, and this started occurring long after the first Thanksgiving. So like we talked about earlier, they were eating lobster, maybe fish. They had lots of deer. Maybe they went duck hunting, but for the most part, it was mainly deer and like lobster type of things. And the reason why turkey kind of started to come about is because it's not like a regular meal that most families would be able to have or afford. Turkeys are big. So they started having it at Thanksgiving when all the family would get together because they needed a big bird in order to feed everybody. So this is kind of a new concept. So if you don't have turkey at Thanksgiving, you're not exactly doing it wrong. My husband's family, they don't eat turkey at Thanksgiving. They actually eat goose. So their long tradition is they would go out hunting, usually in the morning of Thanksgiving, not always, and harvest a goose and then cook it for dinner that night. That doesn't always happen nowadays. Sometimes we just have one in the freezer, but that's what his family likes to enjoy on Thanksgiving. Do you guys do something different besides turkey or goose or something like that? I love every family's tradition. I think that's the best part about Thanksgiving is everybody can do it different. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about wild turkeys, which we do have here in Ohio, which we are really lucky to have here in Ohio because in 1904, there were 0 turkeys found in Ohio. None. And a big part of that was because of deforestation. So most of Ohio actually used to be covered in forests. And then over time, those forests were taken down for logging or building buildings, something like that. So in the year 1904, only 7% of Ohio was covered in forested areas. That's not a lot. Present day, we have about 30% forest coverage. So we're doing a little bit better about protecting habitat and putting habitat back, which is great. We also have turkeys back in Ohio. There was lots of work done by the state, and they would introduce turkeys into the population. And slowly over time, they have made their way throughout the different counties of Ohio, and now they are pretty much everywhere. And there is a hunting season for them again, which is great. Turkeys are Ohio's largest game birds. They stand about 3 to 4 feet tall. They're not as big as like a domestic turkey that you would raise on a farm. They weigh roughly about 20 pounds, maybe a little less. So they're not huge by any means. And domestic turkeys, they can weigh over 50 pounds. That's huge. So wild turkeys, their diet is pretty much everything. They eat a lot of grains and seeds. They also eat a lot of insects. They've been known to eat toads and salamanders and mice. Pretty much whatever they can get their beak on, they're gonna eat. So they're not very picky about what they're eating. Obviously their diet changes throughout the season, so it just kind of depends on what is available to them, but also makes them a fantastic animal to have because they're not picky. They're just going to eat whatever is available to them. The different names of turkeys. So a girl turkey is called a hen. They're not quite as big and they're not quite as flashy in color. They're more of like a drabby brown color, and that's on purpose. So most girl birds especially are kind of blah looking, and that's so that they can camouflage when they're sitting on their nest, and wherever they put their nest they can sit on it and most things won't see them. Whereas male or boy birds, especially turkeys, they are super colorful, and that's to attract females so that females can easily find them, and it helps them to show off too. A full-grown adult male turkey is called a tom, and a younger male turkey is called a jake, and they're a jake up until about they're 2 years old. And you can tell the difference between a tom and a jake based on their tail feathers. So this is what a turkey tail feather looks like. They're pretty big compared to my face. So this one we just found out in the field around here. There's turkeys that hang out in most of our parks actually. So it's not very uncommon for us to find a turkey feather, especially because birds molt their feathers every year. But a tom's turkey tail, so instead of having this big, beautiful fan, the tom has a big, beautiful fan. The jake, the top two feathers are actually longer than the side ones. So that's how you can tell if it's a full-grown adult or not. Their babies are called poults, and mom lays their nest usually on the ground, and she'll dig a little hole in some brush and she'll lay her eggs there, and then she sits on them. The male has nothing to do with the babies once they're born. They stay with mom for several months. When they're first born, they can run and keep up with mom and eat their own food. Their biggest threat is being cold, so they can't keep themselves dry, so they rely on mom to keep them protected. They'll even sleep underneath mom's wings. At night, turkeys roost in trees, and up until they can fly, when they're about, I think it's like 3 weeks old, they're going to roost on the ground with mom. So then as they start to learn how to fly, they come up into the trees. Even though turkeys can fly, they don't really like to. So remember how I said that they're pretty big? They weigh about 20 pounds. That's a lot of weight for them to get off the ground and fly. So their best defense is actually to run, and they can run really, really fast. They can actually run faster than they can fly. So if they're in danger, they're going to run. If they're not feeling like they're in danger, they might fly, especially up to a roosting spot. The habitat for a turkey, they are typically edge dwellers. So that means that they live like on the side of a forest and the side of a field. And they'll spend most of their time in the forest, and that's where they kind of sleep and protect themselves, and they go out in the field, and that's where they find most of their food. So they kind of go back and forth throughout the day. Turkeys make all sorts of calls, right? Have you ever heard a turkey? The typical call that you're gonna think of is a gobble, right? They also make lots of other calls, and this is a turkey call. This is just a box call. This is a great like beginner call. They also have like mouth calls and things like that. There's all sorts of different calls out there, but this is a box call. And this is really fun just to play with and practice your calls. This mainly mimics like what a female would do, so kind of like her yips and her yelps. And so what you would do is you would make them sound like this. You ready? Isn't that cool? Yeah? So that's how you use a turkey call. I forgot to tell you my favorite part about turkeys. Mainly because they're funny words. So you know what the face of a male turkey looks like? Well, this is what it looks like. And they have all sorts of things hanging off of their face. So the one off of their nose is called a snood. The one underneath their chin is called a wattle, and that's just the extra skin. And that big bulb at the bottom is called a caruncle. Aren't those the best names? And turkeys can change the color of their head depending on their mood. So if they're really mad, they're going to be red. If they're kind of calm, they're going to be more of a white or blue color. Isn't that neat? All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed learning about turkeys this week, and I hope everybody has a fantastic Thanksgiving, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.